an actual play podcast. I think we're going to get started with a round of introductions. It's a nice little group. So hopefully trading off and speaking will be a little easier. We can probably verbally or visually show who's going to be speaking next. But I think we can get started with introducing ourselves. First, like name, pronouns, and anything you want to share with the audience. Any experience with AP podcasts, your roles within your podcast. So I'll get started because I'm already saying it. I'm like, oh, that sounds like a lot. But I'm Maya. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. I'll be the moderator for this panel today. And I really fell into TTRPGs during the pandemic, so I'm very, very new to all these things. But I'm currently in one actual play, Dice and Pizza, that we started during the pandemic, and we're continuing through. So I played Zaba, and I pick up various roles. I do a little bit of the captioning, though, that has fallen by the wayside as things have gotten busier. So that is me. Just let someone else pick up.
I'll go next then. Hello, everyone. I'm Brandon O'Brien. I am a poet, writer, and game designer from Trinidad and Tobago. I'm presently working on my own RPG called Sound Clash, which is a Blades in the Dark hack about music, magic, and sticking it to the industry when you discover that the industry does not love you. I am also one of the recent additions to the co-host team of the actual play podcast Speculate, alongside Michael R. Underwood. I have GM'd a couple of campaigns for them so far. We are presently in the middle of Fractal Spire, which is a actual play of the as yet unreleased Evil Hat Blades in the Dark hack, Girl by Moonlight. So if you're into magical girl shenanigans and entering other people's dreams, definitely check out Fractal Spire. Our next session is actually being streamed on Twitch tomorrow night. So if you aren't doing anything during Flights of Foundry, definitely check that out as well.
Sorry, just sneaking that plug into the Discord. Hi, I'm Michael R. Underwood. He, him pronouns for me. I am an author, podcaster, and publishing professional. I spent about 10 years in the industry on the staff side before escaping to focus on writing. I've been co-hosting Speculate since probably 2014, 2015, time is long. Currently I am a co-host and I am a cast member on Fractal Spire. I am getting close to having the team for us to launch a new actual play series, probably sometime in the late spring or early summer, depending on scheduling, and I'm very excited about that. A little bit of history of Speculate is that it used to be like a writing, criticism, and advice show, and co-hosts Greg Gray A. Wilson and I, after other founding co-host Bradley P. Bollier kind of left to focus on writing, Greg and I did the kind of critique and advice show version for a while, but then we were both getting really overloaded, and each of us was interested in actual play and tabletop for some time. So I pitched the idea to him kind of as he was thinking about it himself, that we think about rebooting Speculate as an actual play show. And so we did that with a few like 1 and 2 shot games across a few different systems before bringing Brandon on to GM The Case of the Cindered Seal, a Blades in the Dark series using a custom crew sheet that Brandon created and is available at their itch page. And so that ran for 20 episodes plus like a kind of cast party epilogue. So that's like the long series that we've done. And since then we've done Splendor and Shadow, which is a Rebel Crown mini-series playing Rebel Crown by Michael Dunn O'Connor. And I GM that one, and Brandon is a player. So that's the short version on Speculate.
Oh man, I'm so excited to dig into that and like hearing how you transitioned from like one podcast form to another. Just to give a little bit of background on my podcast, I'm so Dyson Pizza. is an actual play show. I'm just reading off of our website because I don't have the spiel memorized, but we're a quest-based actual play show. It follows three ragtag heroes on a journey to stop an ancient dragon god from destroying their homes. And
As you do.
it's yeah, as one does. And it really came out of the fact that our group, we're all actually based in Little Tokyo. We all met because we support an Asian American performing arts space called Tuesday Night Project. Tuesday Night Cafe is the longest running Asian American performing space in the country, well, in the US specifically. Um, and so we found out that a lot of us really loved TTRPGs. And so we're like, we played like a year-long campaign. And then Derek was like, we should do a podcast. And so that's kind of what we've been doing for the past year or so. We did a lot of pre-production, and now we release every other Monday, I believe. I don't know what our next release is. I think we just released one yes, we released one this Monday. So we're a year in. It's been very fun. And I think I put a link down there, so you can find us on YouTube. You can also find us on any of the listening platforms. But I think I wanted to get, first into maybe like a little bit of like the podcast philosophy, or like kind of your working philosophy, because for Dice and Pizza, our philosophy was we're gonna do this until it's not fun anymore, and then if it's not fun anymore, we're gonna stop. And so we check in every couple months. We're like, are we still having fun? Yeah? Okay, we're gonna keep going. So I was kind of curious to hear if y'all have any sort of like philosophy or way of doing things for your podcast.
Mike, you've been here longer than I have, so I want to know if you want to start.
I can. A big motivation for Greg and I shifting Speculate was about like types of energy that we had, in terms of like the work it would take for me to read a novel really critically to then be able to do 3 podcast episodes on it. Because the old format was we'd read a novel, or we'd be most of the way done with the novel, and we do a reader reaction show, which is like 40 to 60 minutes of, as people who are in the field and reading this book, here are some general thoughts. Episode 2 would be an interview with the author, by which time we'd usually be done, and we try to focus on kind of a craft level. So it was like a peer interview, and learning, okay, what is this person getting? What were they thinking, and how did they approach this work? Here are some specific things that excelled that we pulled out of it that we like to talk about. And then in the 3rd episode, we would do kind of an analysis of craft from the writer's perspective. So the old tagline for Speculate was the podcast for writers, readers, and fans. So that level of engaging and re-engaging with a text was fairly time and energy intensive. And so we just had periods where we were not able to get shows out because we couldn't read the same thing. We had difficulty booking people, the kinds of things that come up in like an interview-oriented show. But both Greg and I were playing tabletop games and interested in them, and we'd done some conversations in the show that kind of touched on the intersections between those fields. And then making time to play was easier for us, at least, to kind of think about doing. Scheduling, 5 or 6 adults who are professionals and have often 2 or 3 jobs is its own challenge, but it ended up being a different kind of cognitive load that has been easier for us to bear. And then we were so impressed with how Brandon was running the Case of the Cindered Seal and the cast that they'd kind of gathered for it, that we were very excited to talk with Brandon and extend that invitation, which he accepted. And so Brandon has brought a lot of, I think, very smart ideas and fun energy and connections to the show. And here's where I'll hand it over to Brandon to kind of solicit their perspective on making the show.
I'm very flattered. Oh my god. One of the reasons why I was really excited to join Speculate especially because I had come into that process just around the time that they started doing tabletop stuff. So I didn't even really know that there was all of this thing taking place in the history of the podcast. I just wanted to play games with people that I liked. But as I dug more into like the non-RPG catalog of the podcast and spoke more with Mike and Greg about what they had in mind now that they had switched to actual play content, one of the things that I think we all kind of agreed on is we like RPGs not only because it's fun to hang out with your friends and just roll some dice, but because since we're all writers, we're consistently thinking about story. And I feel like there's a part of one's brain that goes, playing 2 hours of an RPG is actually less brain intensive than reading a chapter of a novel. So, that was part of the fun for us being, well, at least for me, and I think I do speak for everyone else when I say part of the joy that we get from Speculate is telling a cool story, knowing that much of it is kind of out of our control, um, and that we need to find ways to make those like difficult dice positions manifest into interesting story. Um, I think that all of the attempts that we've had so far, all of the series that we've finished, and the one that we're presently continuing, are just attempts for us to take the games that we already enjoy and want to play and find new storytelling opportunities out of them, or like engage with the interesting story opportunities that are already there, so that the end result is just really cool story being told by really capable writers who are having fun at the same time. So I think that's definitely what's been keeping my energy up in this process, and I'm very excited to continue.
I love that. And as anyone who's tried to organize and keep going a book club can attest, it is so it is so hard to organize and get people to read one book.
Mhm.
And so I can definitely like that aspect of like, oh yeah, it's a different cognitive load to sit down and tell a story versus sit down and read and then like analyze a story. And I really want to return to kind of this discussion of y'all being like writers and like this balance of the playing and the storytelling, because it sounds like it's a very like natural like mesh for y'all. So I want to return to that. I'm gonna put a little pin in that. Um, and so Diced Pizza, we only have like our one season right now, because and we're kind of going through that story arc at the moment, and we might have a couple like side quests coming out. But for you're several like seasons like in, it sounds like, and stop me if I'm misinterpreting. And so this question could be taken at several angles. But I'm really curious about the preparation work that goes into the creation of a season, like um, what the pre-production is for you, like what you do before you ever click record, or maybe I mean with Dice and Pizza we recorded maybe five episodes, and no one is here to correct me, so I'm just gonna say 5 episodes, like where we tested different we tried out D&D and we like no, never mind, we're not doing that. We tried Quest and we each kind of had these different things that were recorded, but are kind of we set aside, and then finally we recorded that first episode that you can hear. So I'm just very curious to hear like what kind of prep work goes into your seasons, and before you maybe ever click record.
Um, so I think I can speak to at least the process that I have, especially doing Fractal Spire, since uh, like I have learned a great deal not only from the process of actually doing actual plays with Speculate now, but being in conversation with other indie designers and other actual play crews about their own internal processes. And one of the things that I'm very grateful for learning not only specifically from Mike, but specifically from some other design folks, is the importance of session zero, where like we could just gather without the pressure of knowing that someone is going to listen to this thing, and not only discuss what our like desires and concerns are, but first and foremost do safety check-ins, so we know exactly what stuff aren't going to show up in this story, um and also having conversations, because we're making this media for the audience, about where our lines meet the lines of the audience that we will not be able to gauge beforehand, and how we're going to engage with that when that comes up. But the other beautiful thing about that is it means that we can essentially write the first draft of the story and no one gets to know what that was. Um, because our session zero for Fractal Spire, because the game Girl by Moonlight very much leans into the idea that your players are engaging with each other again after having experienced the weirdness that they're going through before. We essentially get to write a season one finale for a show that no one has seen. Knowing that when we start the actual series, everybody's engaging with a version of the story that already has hooks in it, because all of those players have already established those hooks. And I think that now that I've had that experience specifically from that game, I want to lean into more potential opportunities for that to come up in other circumstances, because those kind of narrative hooks between players are very powerful for just making sure that action is always taking place, and making sure that everyone is always invested in each other in ways that are interesting. Um, so yeah, that has been kind of radical for me, and I kind of want to take that to like my personal tables as well, because that's just a very cool way to play.
Yeah, I think something that's important to like be really specific about for folks who aren't already familiar with Speculate is that, with the exception of, I think, the original 2 or 3 shot of D&D 5e in Eberron that Greg ran, which was the first sessions that we did, almost everything that we've done, all of our like kind of real episodes, quote unquote, have been broadcast live. And then we take the YouTube export from Twitch, and our audio editor, Rudy Basso, for whom we are very grateful because he does great work, will take the live play and kind of edit out a lot of like the Twitch stage business kinds of stuff, as well as like putting in the intro, outro, theme song, like all of that, all the general kind of, now this is a podcast version, but we are playing live with an audience almost all the time. And so, as somebody who spent some time as a TTRPG scholar from the academia side, I think it's interesting that we're now working in this this mode of actual play that is closer to live theater, compared to something that is like produced audio drama, or maybe closer to something like television, from like a performance studies standpoint, where in like a pre-actual play ecosystem, your audience were your fellow players, and there was almost never a remaining text of the session, in the way that there is when actual play is recorded and either edited or broadcast live. And so that live orientation is something that has been really kind of baked into how we've done shows. But Brandon, Greg, and I have talked about, okay, in what situation might we want to do a non-broadcast show? And would we then want to do more production with that? And a lot of our choices have been informed by what the players are comfortable with, and what our, basically what our production resources are, in terms of what we can put into like paying Rudy a good working rate, and Rudy's kind of availability and schedule. So we've done live stuff, but the session 0 for Rebel Crown, for a Rebel Crown game was not broadcast, but then that is a speculate, or that's a patron bonus. And then for each of the sessions of Rebel Crown, I did GM prep that I just recorded. And then those are all in a YouTube playlist that is a secret playlist accessible by patrons. And so one of the other things we've been kind of talking through as we go is, what do we want to share publicly versus what do we want to make sure to have recorded for ourselves, but then maybe have available as like an extra for people who are really interested in the show, a la like DVD extras.
Oh, I love hearing about that because our podcast is not broadcast live. We sit and set aside time like once or twice a month, and we record just with us, and then that footage goes to Derek, and Derek does a lot of wonderful like editing, and then it gets put together, and then it gets put out. And so there's that like there I imagine there's this difference between actually, like you mentioned, like that theater aspect of actually performing for like a live audience versus for us, we're kind of we're playing with each other with kind of the idea that, oh yes, this is going to be listened to other people later on, but you don't get that immediate sense of, I don't perhaps like feedback and things like that. And perhaps, I mean, I feel like you could go into like a lot and just thinking about performance versus like playing a home game versus like performing in an actual play, like what the difference in performances. And as you mentioned, Brandon, you talk about the fact that you have a group of writers who are like really excited to write and like tell us like kind of write and tell a story together. Um, and ooh, ooh,
Oh
yes,
Lord.
yes, yes. Okay.
I love that Mike mentioned this. So one of the absolutely delightful things about live performance of an actual play is that tabletop RPGs as a system of storytelling is uniquely volatile. Sometimes the dice don't care what goal you had in mind, and suddenly you just have to make things go a certain way. But also, it means that sometimes you are encouraged to make the most radical storytelling decision that you possibly can as a player and lean into it as often as possible. So that happened very early in the case of the Sinded Seal, the first campaign that I GM'd for Speculate, where Blades in the Dark, for folks who are not aware, is designed by John Harper. It is a game of um, intrigue and criminal exploits in this like um, European inspired city where, among other things, ghosts are just a thing that you just have to deal with on a regular basis, and all of the ways that you can deal with ghosts are just plain bad, um, as you one would expect. So while we were like starting out the process of like having players select characters and figure out where the story is gonna go, um, one of our players, Yoi Gawain Lin, who is absolutely brilliant, um, decided that he would play a Hull, which is uh, a character in Blades in the Dark that is not human, is a um, essentially a robot chassis powered by a ghost, um, and uh leaned into the energy of performing like the way that that character is described in the game. Hulls being like disconnected from their own body means that they lack some level of their own memory and are constantly pressured to invoke a kind of humanity that they sometimes struggle with actually invoking because they don't remember who they were. So Yoi's character Crossroads um is almost extremely overpowered, in part because it doesn't know it doesn't know the fact that it is deeply connected to all of the occult shenanigans that is the core of the story. But also because every time that uh, uh, Crossroads becomes tense in a situation, I just decided, you know what? Electroplasm is coursing through your entire body. It is possible that you could just get really frightened and kill an absolute stranger. What if you just leaned into that every time you got upset or annoyed or frightened? And like all of that energy just kind of like started tumbling in ways that everybody really enjoyed, to the point where in that stream, whenever we played Sinded Seal, they made a command in Twitch um for Crossroads, just to remind us of one of the ways that Yoi introduces Crossroads whenever we either start the stream or whenever Crossroads introduces itself to another person, which is, I am made of meat. Crossroads is not made of meat. Crossroads is 100% iron. But I just like all of like the beauty of live performances, obviously, that everybody is really engaged in how wild everything has become, and get to give you feedback on how wild it has become in real time. And that can be also very encouraging because it means that once you have the audience's energy with you, you can kind of just roll through bad dice rolls or situations when a particular decision isn't particularly working, because you're performing in a way that the audience is already leaning into, and that means that they already have faith in whatever storytelling decision comes from that. So yeah.
I could, I would gladly just sit here and listen to
Oh
you talk
god.
more about the whole, that whole,
Sinded Seal is like, I could also speak to like one of the other lovely moments that happened in Sinded Seal, where one of our other players, Iori Kusano, um, who uh like in a moment of running out of options in this like crowded room full of potential enemies, decided, you know what? Let's just pretend that I know everything that's about to happen in this space. Let's just pretend that I know why I'm here, that I'm here for a reason. Let's just pull this entire long con on this career criminal in front of me whose entire gang is surrounding us. Um and proceeded to like spin this long tale about why their character was actually here specifically to pick up something from this gang leader, and that they were doing it for a blessed occult purpose. And I was like, I could make you roll for this. You need to roll in order to convince this person. But since you convinced me, just take it. So yeah,
oh man,
like the beauty of performances, you just get to lean into some of those things sometimes. Sometimes a wild thing happens, and you go, the rules don't help me right now. I'm just gonna go purely on vibe.
It turns out that there is sometimes not very much difference between performing a monologue in character and just writing 300 words of text in your prose work.
Yeah, sometimes improv is the best novel.
Hey, I love that. Especially because I think the reason why our podcast we chose to go with Quest is because Quest is a system that just uses one die, and it's a very pared down system because we wanted to focus on the story. And so we really push, even though none of us are improv trained, we do really push into that feeling of like of that aspect of I mean making weird decisions, and Derek going to be like, oh, okay, I need to not, I can't railroad y'all into things. I just have to go with wherever you want to go. And just I think that energy of being like yes and or like driving certain upping kind of areas of tension, be like, oh, this is dangerous, we're gonna make it way dangerous. Or oh, y'all want to just have like a chill time on the beach, we're gonna have a chill time on the beach for a bit. I don't know, I love hearing those, but I love hearing those moments of audience interactivity and the ways that your performers are driving things. Oh yes. Um, yeah, that's a great question. So you just asked kind of to talk about Dyson Pizza on the slightly more produced ends, because we are much more produced. How much of a given recording session for Dyson Pizza ends up in the episodes? Do you end up redoing lines, cutting digressions? So, I can't go into the nitty-gritty because Derek is our lovely editor, but we do actually, I think we record for about I want to say like an each session is maybe like an hour and 15 minutes. Derek, if you're here, I'm sorry. But not all of it ends up being in the episode, and it does get cut down. And we actually figured out that I think we used to do like hour sessions or like 15-minute sessions. I think Derek like was being really, really careful with time, and then found out, oh, like we'll do like 50 minutes and it'll cut down to 30 minutes. But actually we find more success when we have like more time and we cut it down to like an hour. And so not everything goes in. We don't redo lines, though we will sometimes like redo scenes. I think sometimes we'll go off like on a tangent, or we'll get confused. And so we might sometimes roll back the clock a little bit and redo things. But definitely digressions do get cut out. Sometimes whole scenes get shuffled around. And Derek has a little pile of like clips that he's been adding to for once we get our Patreon up, that we're going to start putting up for people to see the little weird digressions that we go into. But yeah, a lot. I think we have the advantage of the fact that both Derek and Justin, Derek, who is kind of our guides, Derek's our guides, Justin's one of our players, but they both come from like a film background, and so they have experience with editing and things like that, and that is a real asset because I'm not definitely not an editor. My twin, who is also one of the players, we don't know that much about that. So having some folks with like those skills helps a lot with putting the podcast together. Um, uh,
Yeah, something I'd
yes.
jump on there for folks who are watching and listening. Whatever other skills or disciplines or interests you have, if you're making a show, I would encourage you to think about how you might want to bring those into the show. Because as you look at the kind of the realm and the range of actual play, live broadcast recorded, all over, some of the shows that stand out the most maximize the impact of the existing skills of the people involved. Critical Role is an actor's showcase. Dimension 20 goes hard on improv and comedy. In Friends at the Table, they have like some of them, are game designers, and a lot of them engage with video game criticism, so they utilize stuff there. One of their players is a composer, and so Jack DeKeat, compose all the music for the show. And so, like, whatever your skill set is, you can bring that, and that will help make your show unique.
Mhm.
Plus one to that. Yeah. Um, I think like one of the things I sometimes bring into the show, but doesn't actually show up, but does help guide some of the decisions we make, is I do tarot readings during critical moments, and then I'll sometimes do readings afterwards for the folks and be like, yeah, here's like a card that represents that pivotal moment, and it helps. So I think even those like little things, even if they don't like fully make it into the show, they're all coming together to make like your show like this unique thing created by you all. So I'm like
Mhm.
plus one to that so much. Um okay. Let me do a bit of a time check. We're at 6:36, so we got a little bit over 14 minutes left. I'm gonna look at my big thing of questions. There's so much you could go into. But, ooh. Um I think I have a couple things that I'm interested in hearing more about. I think like the work dynamic of what like because I think like you mentioned, this is a collective project that a lot of people are contributing to, and so there's elements of like project management, of working within a team. So I'm really interested in maybe hearing more about like that experience of working together and putting together a podcast. Um, yeah, let's see. That makes sense.
So I will start because project management is not a thing that I'm good at. um, uh, but and this is probably like not helpful and just like an element of noting my own noting the privilege of the group that we have collected. But I do consider myself very fortunate that a lot of the Speculate crew are just already very good friends who engage with each other very often. Mike and Greg and I like regularly just hang out online or just like whenever one of us is streaming, the rest of us are just like present just to hang out and just like be cool with each other. But in particular, one of the like secondary benefits of the case of the Sinded Seal is that that entire cast just likes playing with each other often. In fact, that's the exact same cast that's in Fractal Spire as a result. So a lot of the like difficult management stuff that would be particularly hard for what is already a longer series than other Speculate stuff is kind of um resolved by the fact that we're already on Discord every once in a while just griping about work or sharing stories that we're working on. So I just get to pop in like at 9 o'clock at night and going, when do you all think we might be able to stream our next thing? And then I already have a consensus and we just get to continue just being cool. That is not the case all the time. Suffice it to say that when trying to engage with writers in general, it can often be very difficult to get for people who need to meet their own deadlines and are probably working another job and have family commitments, especially during the pandemic, can be very difficult. But for the most part, we have been regularly very fortunate in that one of the kind of side effects of being in SFF is a lot of people already do play RPGs and would like to have an opportunity to play with their peers and will often try very hard whenever possible to see if they can make scheduling stuff work. It's just that all of the other commitments, all of the other like efforts in order to make that work, like how do I ask for people what times of day they will be available for our first thing can often be very difficult and can often like be very emotionally intense as well. Um so we have like structures in place like since very recently in fact. We've been using stuff like Doodle and When to Meet to ask people what times they might be available. We tend to email individuals one-on-one to ask them if they would first be open to a thing, and then once we have a potential crew, check in afterwards to see if they're comfortable playing with these people and whether those times commitments will work. Um, and that system is still being tweaked as we speak, but for the most part it has at least given us a very good sense of what we need to do in order to make those things more available for those players.
Yeah, and on like a kind of overall how does the show get made perspective, because Greg is the kind of founding co-host who has been with Speculate since the beginning. He is more directly involved with like website maintenance and some of like the back end technology. He used to be the point person who would communicate with our audio editor, which I've since taken over. Like Brandon has been doing most of the GMing and like scheduling and people wrangling for what I now think of as the Strange Friends crew, which is that cast from The Case of the Cindered Seal and now Fractal Spire. And I do episode descriptions and timestamps and some of the support for Rudy so that Rudy's time is very efficiently used in taking the material, knowing where to stop, because having our editor not be someone who's at the table playing means that we need to do a little bit of translation and basically providing our editorial view or like take on here's how we see this being turned into this other format because we are translating through having our editor work on that. And then, you know, Google Sheets and Discord do a lot of the rest of our organization. And, you know, we check in about how's stuff coming on Patreon, what do we want to put on Patreon versus somewhere else, like rethinking incentives and projects, trying to balance between our great enthusiasm and various interests in a bunch of games that we want to play while understanding that we all have other major priorities professionally and personally, and trying to not get ourselves over our own heads, but to make sure that we are able to continue to have the type of fun that we want to and to be able to share it in a way that is exciting to get feedback and kind of helps us as professionals be visible in this space and participate in another medium of storytelling.
And I feel like that does start to maybe lead us into a question that I see Luke put into the Discord, and I see that we have several questions that talks about like how to manage, like, for example, that like turning as Luke says, quote unquote, turning one of my few pure, I worry about turning one of my few pure hobbies remaining into something else to stress about, like, and managing that dynamic, worrying about losing the relaxation of the private table by making it public. And I think I echo, Brandon, I echo what you were talking about, in that I also feel very privileged in the sense that the group that came together first through Tuesday Night Cafe, because like all of us except my twin are on staff. So we started like a Discord during the pandemic, and then we started playing games together. And then Derek was like, we should put together a podcast. So we created a different Discord, and so we're always able to talk things through, and we're always kind of able to check in and have hangouts, but also schedule like specific times to talk through Dyson Pizza, to talk through, like, for example, launching the Patreon, which we're trying to get started on in the next couple months. So it's difficult because it really depends on the group of people that you're able to put together. But I also feel very privileged that I'm working with a group of friends, and so we always are like able to check in and be like, hey, like, I mean, we were scheduled to do a recording just this week, and folks were sitting in the call, and I was like, I can't do it today. I'm just not coming in with the right mindset. They were like, yeah, okay, we're just gonna sit here and chat then for a bit. And I cleaned my room for a bit because I was like, my room's too messy for me to record. So maybe not an answer, Luke, but there is that, I think, that element of like, yeah, trying to keep the fun. It requires a lot of like being okay with letting things go.
Mhm.
I do see it's 6:45. I want to give people time to also like do their last shout outs, because I know that might take a bit, but I guess maybe this is the time to do like a last round of like takeaways or things that we want to let our audience know, and anything else that you want to address that you're like, oh, that came up.
So very briefly, I also do want to speak to that question. Because I mean, as a writer and game designer, there are points when I look at the thing that I'm making and go, this is work now. How do I feel about that? Um, but I do think, and again, this is the luck of the draw. One of the good fortunes that I have working with Speculated particular is we get to just like carve out some time where we're not thinking about this. We have our own private game. We have private games that we run elsewhere. We often regularly meet up at least once or twice a month just to hang out and spend time with each other. And not have to think about the game as well. But I think that it's also important to be able to say, hey, maybe this is not a thing I feel comfortable making into a kind of work. Um, because sometimes being able to do a thing because you enjoy it is more enjoyable than making things for other people. You do not owe other people anything. Um, but if you do get a kind of joy out of sharing that with those people, you also get to decide how you want to share them with those people. Um, And other than that, like my only other like lasting thought is RPGs are supposed to be fun. And they can be fun not only from the playing perspective, but from the perspective of being able to share a story with other people, and know that you are part of the process of constructing this thing, and making this like beautiful experience for other people to witness. And you get to decide how that happens however you want, so long as everyone is engaging safely, of course. Um, but yeah, there is a lot of cool stuff to be discovered from the process of doing that.
Yeah, I will ditto Maya on Orion D. Black is a very good follow on Twitter if you want um, uncensored thoughts on the state of the field from production standpoint, creative standpoint, and industry standpoint. Um,
Orion is just regularly cool. Like you should be
yeah,
following Orion full stop.
yeah. Um, Jane had a question in the chat about saturation, and I think one like uh, very briefly, for the most part, most creatives competition is not other creatives. It is poverty, like economic and or time poverty and visibility. So if people don't know that your show exists, they can't engage with it. If people don't have the money to be able to use the platforms that they need to watch or listen to your show, then they can't listen to your show. If they have to spend all of their time doing things that don't allow them to engage with their show, then they just can't. And actual play as an art form, when compared to a lot of other narrative art forms, um, is very long. Like campaign one of Critical Role is 500 hours ish, something like that. And even shorter series, like a series of Friends at the Table, is often like 50-ish hours of audio, maybe more like 60 or 70 for some of them. And so if you told someone who had not engaged with actual play at all, oh, here's this great show, there's 60 episodes and it's a total of about 90 hours. That's a very large thing that you're asking someone to do. You're basically saying, spend the time equivalent of watching a 5-season TV show from the 2000s, where there's like 100 episodes, and that can be tricky. And if you're listening to slash watching 10 hours of actual play a week, it may be really difficult to pick up another show, even one that's just releasing 1 hour of material a week. And so that I see as a big challenge for any show trying to grow and find an audience. But again, I think you can turn to what are your specific creative interests as a team? Can you highlight games that are not getting as much attention, where you may be able to engage with the existing audience and communities that are playing those games, and to think about what will make something worthwhile to you, even if number does not go up on Patreon, on your feed or whatever, as long as it's still fun. Are you still getting what you want out of it?
Perfect. And I know that we're a little over time, so I'm just gonna let y'all plug your shows, plug yourself, all that jazz.
So yeah, my name is Brandon O'Brien. You can find me on Twitter at The Rising Tides. Um, and again, speculateSF.com. You can find us on Twitter, twitter.com/speculate, if I'm not mistaken. Please remind me, Mike. Sometimes I forget the Twitter.
There are too many Twitters. Speculate SF on Twitter.
Right. Yes. You another reminder that we will actually be streaming tomorrow night, starting from 7 EST on twitch.tv/Arvan Elleron. That's Gregory Wilson's Twitch channel. For our next session of Girl by Moonlight Fractal Spire. A lot has happened, and the Dream Knights are presently in a great deal of peril. So that's going to be particularly exciting. So if you want to discover more about about Speculate as a podcast, about the Strange Friends as a playgroup, or about Girl by Moonlight, which is upcoming from Evil Hat Productions and is a very cool game if you're into magical girl shenanigans, definitely check us out live tomorrow night.
And I'm Michael R. Underwood, one of the other co-hosts, along with Gregory A. Wilson, who you can find streaming these games at twitch.tv/Arvin Eleron. So he, like, one of the things he contributes is he has an active Twitch channel that has its own audience that are used to engaging with actual play. And if you're interested in some more of the, like, how we make the show, what's going on with the show, other things that we've done, patreon.com/speculate. If you become a subscriber and help us pay our audio editor and keep making cool shows, then you will get access to things that include but are not limited to bonus episodes, including all of the old bonus episodes of the earlier version of the show. So if you're interested in, like, craft advice as a writer, there's just a treasure trove back there. That you can get my GMing prep episodes from Rebel Crown, our game, of Splendor and Shadow, our game of Rebel Crown. We're going to be and have been putting up some bonus and behind the scenes features for Fractal Spire as well. So you can check us out there. And I want to say thank you very much to Maya and toss it back to them.
Thank you, and thank you both to you both. This is a wonderful conversation. Again, I'm Maya. I play Zaba on Dice and Pizza. I put the link. You'll have to scroll. But we're out on all platforms. We're having a really good time right now. All united in common cause against an asshole right now. So, pardon my language. I don't know if we're allowed to curse on this, but thank you all so much for attending. Thank you all for being here at this wonderful conference. You'll have a great night. Take care.